So with Martin Luther, we're dealing with one of the most unlikely of the great Christian theologians. He doesn't fit the stereotype. He's not a great office holder. The only job he ever holds is as professor of theology at an obscure Eastern German university. He's frankly fat. He's much more of a sensualist than great Christian theologians are supposed to be. He can be positively foul-mouthed at times. His use of language is really shocking to modern eyes. He's open in his celebration of his enjoyment of his sensuality. He's a great beer drinker. He openly celebrates the fact of his being married. He's not the first great Christian theologian to be married, but maybe the first one to really make a point of it and to celebrate it in that sort of public event. And he and his wife together become icons of the perfect Protestant family. You'll find their portraits side by side in good Lutheran homes. It's a very medieval story. He's very much a man of the Middle Ages, born in a moderately prosperous Saxon family in the 1480s. His father is a miner and is choosing to set up his son in life with the fortune that he himself has made by sending him to university, and he's going to become a lawyer. I mean, this is the kind of thing that ambitious parents do for their children down the ages. And so he sends young Martin off to university and he prospers, and then disaster strikes when he's 18 years old and something, again, tremendously medieval happens to him. He's caught in a thunderstorm at night. He's terrified. This is all from his later autobiographical reminiscences, some of which are, we have to ask questions about, but it's the story we've got, and the fact that this is the story he chooses to tell us is interesting anyway. Anyway, the story is, he's caught in this thunderstorm and he's terrified. It's at night, he thinks he's going to die, and so he makes a vow. He makes a vow to St. Anne, to the mother of the Virgin Mary, promising that if he survives, he'll become a monk. And he does, and he keeps his vow, to his father's horror, all that expensive legal education up in smoke. He goes off and joins the Augustinian order, fashionable, scholarly monastic order, and apparently hates it. He finds the struggle of monastic life to begin with tremendously difficult. Not so much the discipline, but the confrontation with his own sinfulness that this life involves. This is a rigorous existence of prayer, of penitence, of study, but he finds that instead of coming to terms with and overcoming his own sins, the more he confronts them, the more he's sunk underneath them. He later says that if a monk could ever have saved himself by monkery, it would have been him. Very Luther kind of thing to say. But instead, all he's able to do is convince himself of his own sinfulness and the utter distance between that and God's righteousness. His superiors, recognizing the drama that this novice is making about himself, pack him off to university to study theology. And he goes to Wittenberg University eventually, where he takes up a teaching job in 1511. And that's where he remains for the rest of his life. As I said, it's the only job he ever holds. Pat Collinson, one of the great historians of the period, says that for Luther the Reformation happens between lectures. Other than a few brief periods away, he continues to lecture in biblical studies for the remainder of his life. And during the course of the following decade, we don't know precisely when this happens, if there was a single event, between 1511 and 1520 at the very latest, he has a breakthrough. He comes out of this spiritual despair, this sense of being unable to free himself from his own sins, and breaks through to a completely different way of believing.